Hello, I'm Michael Hainsworth.
And I'm Parisa Mahboubi, a senior policy analyst at the City Howard Institute.
As we try to put the pandemic behind us, a new reality is emerging. To paraphrase the rock band The Who, the kids are not all right. The coronavirus fueled youth unemployment rates to record highs. In her new co-authored report, Lives Put on Hold, the Impact of the COVID-19 Pandemic on Canada's Youth, Parisa warns that Canada's youth face career scarring and learning losses. And if we don't do something about it, the impact on employment, productivity, and their future wages could be lifelong. Parisa, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, you co-authored with Amira Higazi that youth were disproportionately affected by work and education disruptions. Now, any parent can appreciate that, but spell it out for us. How so?
Thank you for the opportunity. The reason that kids were more affected more severely during the pandemic in the labor market was their overrepresentation in industries that were hardest hit. For example, food services, accommodation and food services. So proportionally, younger individuals more likely have jobs in these occupations, and because they required to have face-to-face interaction with the customers, and because the COVID was a health-related crisis, they weren't able to maintain their employment and become unemployed during the pandemic, and also during each waves that we faced.
So compare and contrast for us. At the height, what was youth unemployment like compared to the general population?
So always youth individuals in the labor market experience higher unemployment rate. For example, at least 4 or 5 percentage points. There are gaps in normal times when the economy is strong. But during the pandemic, the gap, it becomes significantly large because the impact was larger on youth. It doesn't mean that the older workers and prime age workers didn't experience high unemployment. Actually, their unemployment became double digit. But because the impact was larger on young individuals, the gap in unemployment rates between youth and other workers increased significantly.
Let's talk about the educational side of this conversation for a moment. Can we quantify the impact COVID-19 had on education?
Unfortunately, currently, because there is no data that we can use, for example, to assess the educational impact in terms of learning losses on Canadian students, and mainly because, for example, the stop in the provincial assessment, standardized assessment test during the pandemic, we are not able really to measure that until the next round of the assessments become available. But there are some regional data, and there are some indication based on past literature on school disruptions, and also international evidence from other countries. They all point to the significant impact on educational outcomes in terms of learning on students, and we are expecting to see large learning losses, especially among those disadvantaged students who weren't able to benefit from, for example, tutoring sessions during the pandemic, although that one also was affected during the pandemic, but at least some parents were able to provide online tutoring session for their students. And some other disadvantaged students, they had even because of digital gaps in terms of, for example, having access to devices that make them able to do e-education, they had difficulties to continue in learning for at least some period of time in the beginning.
Right. Low income and disadvantaged youth simply fell into this digital divide during the pandemic, ultimately making them the hardest hit.
Absolutely, and these students, even prior to pandemic, normally there are some gaps between these students and other students. So there has been some inequalities in education that could be magnetized by the pandemic.
Did we not have programs in place to help disadvantaged and low-income families bridge that digital divide?
During the pandemic, for example, the province of Ontario and different schools tried to reach out those individuals to provide them with devices, but there were some lags, and unfortunately, we are seeing still some students, even right now, if there will be another a wave or a school disruption, they don't easily have access to these devices to be able to access to. So we need to think about that. We need to think about the closing digital divide, because it was based on the past. It's also possible that we see school disruptions in the future, and also some trends toward online learning. So in the future, it may become more popular in terms of providing education through online tools.
Do the various school boards across the province of Ontario and all the other provinces not have programs and policies in place to help these kids catch up, whether it be ones who fell into the digital divide or the kid who just, in grade 2 simply couldn't sit in front of a screen all day?
That's actually true, because one of them, for example, in terms of disruptions, not only access to online learning was the issue, even for those having access to online learning, difficulty in terms of engagement and interaction with classmates is one of the issues that could cause learning losses. But in terms of provinces, we know, for example, for the fact the province of Ontario tried to address that digital divide gap in Ontario. But again, it's not only digital gap in terms of devices and resources, it's also in terms of teachers' readiness to be able to provide education through virtual tools, and also in terms of engagement. That was one of the issues that could cause learning losses.
So it doesn't sound like there's really a solid plan already in place to help these kids catch up.
There are some introduction of, for example, increasing investment in education across the provinces. They try to increase investment. They try to provide some sort of tutoring session, not equally across the provinces, and not equally to the same extent. But some provinces have already taken action. But the problem is that some of these actions and some of increased investment in education, they are not well targeted. We know, for example, some students need more supports than others. And also we know that virtual learnings are not effective as in-person learnings. For example, when we look at provinces' action in terms of providing supports to students, one of the plans is to provide e-tutoring. So that could also be an issue for some students, and also in terms of effectiveness is going to be questionable.
Now, you're speaking to a member of Generation X. We came out of post-secondary education right into a recession. Millennials, depending on their age, have already suffered 2 of them. I suppose we have plenty of historical evidence of the impact recessions have on new labor market entrants early in their careers?
Absolutely. In general, unemployment affects the individual's future earnings, and also the possibility of become employed, or even chance of unemployment. It's going to affect that. And we know for the fact from past recessions that these persistent long-term impacts are larger for new graduates and new entrants to the labor market, young individuals, and especially it's large during the recession, because it takes time for the economy and labor market to recover. And to be able to mitigate the long-term impact, individuals need to change their job more quickly and find and move to employment that they provide higher quality in terms of earnings and high quality jobs. But during the recession, there are employment opportunities are limited. And during the recovery also, because it happens slowly for the labor market to recover, it takes time for individuals to be able to shift from one low quality job to another job. And that's why some young individuals during the recession, they experience scarring effects that it's going to affect their lifetime earnings and also employment opportunities in the future.
Can we quantify the impact? Like when an economy comes out of recession, what's the lag time between the economy as a whole coming out of the recession and a jobs market coming out of recession?
It really depends on the type of recession. For example, the COVID crisis was a unique one in many ways. Not only it affected, for example, individuals' labor market life, in terms of labor market impacts, it also affected all aspects of our life. And the impact was really severe. The pandemic was the deepest, we experienced the deepest recession. But at the same time, the recovery was quick because we were able, because it wasn't natural. It was the recession was induced by the governments. They have to control the spread of the virus. So the recovery was really quick, but it wasn't like that in previous recession. For example, it lasted many years for young individuals. Hardly they could return to pre-pandemic labor market levels in terms of, for example, employment and unemployment rate. So it really depends on the type of the pandemic. There is no specific number around that. But what I can tell you is that the crisis we had related to the pandemic was the deepest, but also the shortest. It was the deepest and shortest recession, and we saw the quick recovery, which is good, actually. This is promising in terms of a scarring effect.
Meantime, hasn't government already taken some steps to support youth recovery?
They did, actually, not only provinces in terms of addressing educational gaps. I'm not talking about the effectiveness, but they've taken actions. But also the federal government in their recovery plan, they introduce option in terms of creating job opportunities, high quality job opportunities, short term, but still it's going to help individuals to gain experience they need to be able to transition, to be able to find better jobs, and also work integrated learning opportunities, which we know they are really beneficial for individuals in terms of giving them better options to be able to find better employment after graduations. And also the government plan to basically modernize the agreement with provinces to provide training, to assist workers and employers, to provide training to young individuals to prevent unemployment. But these are plans. During the recession, we need to address challenges. We need to prevent unemployment as much as possible and as quickly possible, because unemployment is going to have long-term impact, not only the duration of unemployment, but also frequency of unemployment is going to affect future outcomes for individuals. So preserving jobs and reducing unemployment frequency and duration would be should be the target goal for governments when crises happen, and also during the recovery they have to address that.
So you recommend further action, including expanding employment services to reduce unemployment duration and recurrence. What should that look like?
The reason is that for adding that recommendation to my paper is that there are some groups of youth that are experiencing high unemployment, even in this tight labor market. We know we are facing shortages in terms of high job vacancies, and we know unemployment rate is quite low. But when we look at pockets of youth, there are some youths that are experiencing in this labor market very high unemployment rate. There are several reasons for that. They are either they are located in areas that jobs are not available, but we are seeing high job vacancy across all sectors and everywhere. So this could also related to their lack of knowledge about the opportunities. They don't know how to apply. They don't know how to get connected to employers. And it could be also some skills problem. So these counseling and these type of supports would be beneficial, especially if they are targeted to those individuals have difficulties finding employment in this current situation, would support individuals to reduce unemployment rate for them.
So how do we enhance labor market flexibility and mobility to reduce mismatches for that first job?
So when individuals are not located in where the jobs are available, or they are not either they are not able to relocate, or there are some restrictions, moving from one province to another province, if they have a specific qualification that acts as a barrier for them to move in other region, in another area that jobs are available, it's going to it's going to play as a barrier for those individuals to be able to find employment. So increasing labor market mobility and addressing that is going to help mismatches, because now individuals with the right skills are able to get connected to the jobs that require those type of skills and education. But of course, it's going to be helpful for younger youth who are not in a school, or because younger kids, they are attached to their families or the schools they are attending. So, but for youth are not in a school, this type of policy is going to be very helpful for them. And we know for the fact youths who are not in a school and some with low education, they experience higher unemployment rate.
So you also recommend governments encourage participation in and support for opportunities in education and address barriers to participation for non-student youth. What should that look like?
In general, low educated individuals, they experience higher unemployment rate. And when we look at low educated individuals, youth compared to older adults, again, youth experience higher unemployment rate. So for those individuals not in a school, not in employment, there is also risk of losing existing skills they had, in terms of there will be a process of skills erosion. So to be able to support those youth without job and not in education, to be able to get them connected to employers and to make them able to find employment, we have to also connect them to education, to be able to train, to be able to gain some skills that employers are looking for, to make them able to find employment. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to find any job and remain unemployed, and eventually they are going to exit the labor market.
Now, your final suggestion is then one that will make every elementary school kid grown. More summer school?
Currently, because last 2 years education wasn't really something serious for many students, so more summer school today would be beneficial for them to generate better outcomes for them and also for their societies. So even if it's not going to be summer school, after or before, in the September when kids go back to school, so before and after a school tutoring session would be beneficial for them.
Now, if there was one takeaway you'd want someone joining us today to understand, what would it be?
So the most important thing is that currently there are some individuals, young individuals who are disadvantaged, like low educated youth, and also some groups of youth like those with some ethnicity and some race background. They experience high unemployment rate. they need targeted support. At the same time, we are having students from with disadvantaged background and low social economic status. They also experience high learning losses. They also need specific support. They need support more than other students. So targeted supports in terms of learning and also in terms of employment assistance and employment labor market policies would be beneficial for these individuals and also help them to contribute to the labor market right now or in the near future.
Parisa, thank you for your time and insight today.
Thank you for having me.
Parisa Mahboubi is a senior policy analyst with the C.D. Howe Institute. Still to come from the C.D. Howe, Michael D. Bordo, the Board of Governors Professor of Economics and Director of the Center for Monetary and Financial History at Rutgers University. That's September 15th. And October 26th, the Great Rebalancing Act, a roundtable luncheon with the chief investment officers of the CPPIB, Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, and the CDPQ. For details on these events and more, visit cdhowe.org. I'm Michael Hainsworth. Thanks for joining us.
You've been listening to the C.D. Howe Institute podcast with Michael Hainsworth. Subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. The C.D. Howe Institute is an independent, not-for-profit research institute whose mission is to raise living standards by fostering economically sound public policies. The Institute is widely considered to be Canada's most influential think tank and a trusted source of essential policy intelligence, distinguished by nonpartisan, evidence-based research and subject to definitive expert review. Visit cdhowe.org and follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Thank you.